Hare Krishna. So today we are going to start the fourth and the last section of chapter 1, Arjuna's doubts. These are from verses 28 to 46. So just last time we saw this verse number 27. This was the last verse that we discussed in our last session. So here we see that how Krishna purposefully placed the chariot of Arjun not in front of any of the Kauravas with whom Arjuna had enmity, but purposefully in front of the chariot of Bhishma and Drona, so that Arjun could get bewildered and Krishna will get the opportunity to speak the whole of Bhagavad Gita. So now the next section, that is beginning with verses 28. Now Arjun will describe his reasons for not fighting the war, and later on in second chapter we will see how Krishna one by one rejects all these reasons. So starting with just the fourth section of Arjuna's doubt, verses 28 to 46. So here this is the section summary. So these are basically the reasons which Arjun gave for not fighting. The first reason is compassion, second is enjoyment, third is destruction of family, fourth is the fear of sinful reactions, the fifth is saintliness, and sixth is indecision. So we will analyze all these six reasons which Arjun is giving in this section from verses 28 to 46. And we can learn so many things about the qualities of a Vaishnava, because Arjun is a very great devotee. So here all these things, because these reasons which is giving for not fighting, they bring out the Vaishnav qualities in Arjun. So for example, the first quality of compassion. So we can see that as Arjun is a very soft hearted devotee, he becomes very overwhelmed with compassion, and he is forgetting himself when he is seeing his relatives before him. And although here Srila Prabhupada mentions that this has happened because of his material conception of life, but we know from the purport of Acharyas, and even Srila Prabhupada mentions in his purport, that Arjun is doing it only as an instrument of Krishna to show us what happens in our life. He is a pure devotee. He is not in material conception of life, but still he is taking the position of a conditioned soul in order to teach all of us that how we get bewildered and how we can come out of our bewilderment. So this is the first reason that Arjun gives, that out of compassion, he was very compassionate. He never wanted to kill so many people just for his own sense gratification. So the first reason that Arjun gives for not fighting the battle is that we should show compassion to people and not kill unnecessarily. The second reason that he gives is the loss of enjoyment. So this is a little less noble reason, but this is also an important reason. So Arjun argues here that it will be impossible for him to enjoy the kingdom if he wins it at the cost of the lives of his family members. So here Arjun is mentioning that how do we enjoy opulence? You do not enjoy opulence alone. You share your opulence with your family members, and we want to show people and we want to gain the appreciation of people that yes, such and such person is so rich or he has so much opulence, and that gives us some kind of happiness. So although this is a little materialistic reason and this is a little less noble reason, but Arjun gives this reason also, that suppose I gain the whole kingdom but I have nobody to show off that I am the king, I have so much money, but whom will I show? Because generally we get this enjoyment when we want to show off our opulence and our wealth to somebody in the family. So this is a little less noble reason, but Arjun gives this reason also, that if the kingdom is there but I have no relatives only with whom to enjoy, then how will I enjoy? So third reason that he gives is the reason of destruction of the family. So Arjun is fearful that with the death of so many great Kshatriyas of the royal dynasty, there will be no one to protect the religious principles, and hence the irreligion will flourish. And when irreligion flourishes, then women will become unprotected and they will become corrupted by unscrupulous men. And therefore, society will be overrun by unwanted progeny. The traditional Vedic rituals will no longer be performed because no one will be qualified to perform them, and thus hell will await both the family and the destroyer of the family. So we will discuss this reason in great detail when we come to the verses. So basically what here Arjun is telling is that if we kill so many Kshatriyas who are responsible for maintaining the religious principles on the society, so if they are killed, the upholders of the religion, if they are killed, then who will protect the religion of the society? And then surely irreligious things will flourish. And sure enough, when irreligion is flourishing, the women will become unprotected and they will become corrupted by unscrupulous men. And obviously, when women lose their chastity, then the progeny is a Varna Shankar. Varna Shankar means progeny that has not been begotten by religious principles and they have no good qualities. These are the people who grow up to become criminals. And if such a society prevails where so many unwanted progeny are there, then so many criminals and everywhere there will be chaos. And therefore, those who are responsible for creating such a chaos in the society, so obviously they are going to go to hell, and the family which to which they belong, that is also going to go to hell. So this is the third reason that Arjun gives. Now the fourth reason is fear of sinful reactions. So here Arjun is thinking that if even if we win this battle, so we will gain some enjoyment, some royal happiness, some opulence. We will become the kings of the whole world. But because of killing so many people, we will get a lot of sinful reactions. And because of those sinful reactions, we will suffer more in hell after this life. So for little bit of enjoyment in this life, I will have to suffer so much after this life. So is so much killing worth the royal happiness which we are going to get in return? So he is thinking that my fighting this battle will give me the result opposite to what I actually want. We want to be happy, but if I kill all these people, the result will be suffering for me because I am trading just little bit of happiness of this earthly planet to so much suffering into hell after I leave this world. So this is the fourth reason that Arjun gives. And then the fifth reason that he gives is saintliness. So Arjun is telling that out of saintliness, one should forgive the family members even if they have done something wrong. So if one behaves the same way as the enemy does, then what is the difference between him and the enemy? So Arjun is telling that although we know that they are the people who have done wrong to us, they are on the wrong side, but still, out of saintliness, one should not kill his own family members. Even if they have done something wrong, we should forgive. And if we also, they are our enemies, and we also behave like their enemies, then there will be no difference between us and them. So out of saintliness, this is the fifth reason that Arjun gives. And the sixth reason is indecision. That Arjun is not convinced that conquering his enemies is better or being conquered by them is better. He is thinking that the kingdom is flourishing already under Duryodhan's rule. So why should the Pandavas fight only to take over the kingdom for themselves? Because anyhow, the kingdom is flourishing only. He wonders whether millions of people should die just to enthrone him and his family. So we know that when Pandavas were there in Vanvas, so that time Duryodhan, he pampered the citizens too much, giving them so many facilities so that the whole city, the whole kingdom, it comes under the control of Duryodhan, and they start supporting Duryodhan by the time Pandavas return. But obviously the citizens knew who is on the virtuous side and who is on the evil side. So that is what here Arjun is referring, that the kingdom is already flourishing only under Duryodhan's rule. So why should we fight only because we want to replace them? So this is the sixth reason that Arjun gives. So now we will go verse by verse in this section and analyze these reasons in little more detail. So starting with verse 1.28, this verse shows the compassion aspect of Arjun. So here Arjun is saying, my dear Krishna, seeing my friends and relatives present before me in such a fighting spirit, I feel the limbs of my body quivering and my mouth drying up. So here we see that a kind devotee like Arjun is overwhelmed with compassion for his kinsmen, friends, relatives who had so decided to fight amongst themselves. He is thinking that what is the use of fighting amongst themselves? and we will kill each other. It's a fratricidal war, and we will all die. So what is the use of such a war? Better they keep the kingdom with them, they keep the throne with themselves, let them be the king. So why uselessly kill? So this is the compassion that is coming out of the heart of a Vaishnava like Arjun. So this is a natural quality of a devotee, that he becomes very compassionate. So then, although Duryodhan was prepared to kill in order to keep the kingdom, should a soft-hearted, compassionate devotee like Arjun also act so foolishly? So that is what he is thinking. If they are on the wrong side, they want to do it, but should we also act in the same way? And for his own soldiers, Arjun was surely feeling sympathy from the beginning only, but he was even feeling compassion for the soldiers of the opposite party, foreseeing their imminent death. So he could see so many dead bodies, the scene, he could visualize the scene of the battlefield after the battle is over. And he's thinking, is it worth just for gaining the throne for few years that we will be there? Like we know that even after gaining the kingdom, the Pandavas they ruled for 37 years. After that, they also left. When Krishna left, they also left. They also took Vanprasth. They enthroned the next king, Parikshit Maharaj, as the next king, and they all left. So they ruled only for 37 years. So we can see here that's what he is thinking, that only for 37 years of royal rule, should we kill so many people? So that is what is the question. So then he's thinking, although it is not mentioned here that, but we can very easily imagine that Arjun was also crying out of compassion. So these words, the way he is speaking, we can very easily understand. So our acharyas mentioned this, that Arjun was not only just speaking these things, he was also crying. So much compassion he has that he's crying for their death. So such symptoms in Arjun, this was not due to weakness, but due to his soft-heartedness. And that's the characteristic of a pure devotee of the Lord. So weakness, so someone can think that he has become weak because of two reasons. His body is trembling. Maybe someone can tell because he became fearful that I have to fight with Bhishma and Drona, such powerful warriors. So no, he has not become fearful. Arjuna is fully determined to fight if it is for the right cause, if it is a dharma yuddha. So he can very easily fight. So it is not because he has become fearful, and also it is not like kind of the worldly foolish kind of family attachment, but it is because of his soft heartedness, and that's the characteristic of a pure devotee. So this is a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam which describes the characteristic of a pure devotee. यस्यास्ति भक्तिर भगवती अकिंचना सर्वैर गुणैस्तत्र समस्ते सुरा. So हराव अभक्तस्य कुतो महद्गुणा मनोरथेन सति धावतो बहि. So manorathena sati dhavato bahi, that they are just running on their mental, the karmis, they are just running on their mental chariot. So how can they have any good qualities? But devotees, they automatically develop all the good qualities of the demigod. So the translation of the verse is like this, that one who has unflinching devotion for the personality of Godhead has all the good qualities of the demigods. But one who is not a devotee of the Lord has only material qualifications that are of little value. This is because he is hovering on the mental platform. He is just riding on a chariot of the mind, and tend to be attracted by the glaring material energy. So if someone is just showing some good qualities because he's on the mental platform, so we know that mind is very flickering. Mind can immediately change. Today I like this, and tomorrow I may not like that same thing, and I start liking somebody else. So something else. So that may happen. So someone who is just displaying some good qualities because he is just on mental platform, so we cannot trust such a person. But devotees, because they are fixed on the lotus feet of the Lord, they automatically have all the good qualities of the demigods. They need not worry about developing all qualities one by one. They automatically develop all the good qualities of the demigods. So it automatically comes. That is what is being mentioned here. And although pure devotee, here Arjun is playing a part of a conditioned soul with Dehatma Buddhi. Like he is considering these people that they are my own men. So actually Srila Prabhupada tells in his purport that everybody is own man. It's not that somebody is own man and somebody is somebody else, is somebody other's man. Everybody is own man. A pure devotee's vision is Vasudha Eva Kutumbakam, that he sees everyone as his own family member, right? So that is the consciousness of a devotee. And somebody who categorizes people as these are my men and these are enemies men or other men, so that is called Dehatma Buddhi. So Arjun, here he is playing the part of a conditioned soul in order to teach us and in order to create an opportunity for Krishna to speak Bhagavad Gita. So therefore he is behaving as a person with Dehatma Buddhi, as a conditioned soul, and he is telling that these are my own men. But actually he is a very pure devotee and he is just becoming an instrument of the Lord to deliver this message of Bhagavad Gita. So moving on to the next verse, 1.29, this also shows the compassion aspect of Arjun. So the translation of this verse is like this, that my whole body is traveling. Arjun is telling to Krishna that Krishna, my whole body is traveling. My hair is standing on end. And my bow, Gandiva, the famous bow of Arjun, is slipping from my hands and my skin is burning. So there are two kinds of trembling, the great spiritual ecstasy and out of great fear under material conditions. So there are two kinds of crying also. One thing is crying because of pain, and one thing is crying because of great happiness, out of ecstasy. Similarly, the trembling is also there. Perspiration can also be there. Everything, the Ashta Sattvic Vikar that we see that happen, which symbolize ecstasy in spiritual life. So these kind of vikars can happen to a person who is just about to reach the state of a material coma, like when someone experiences a lot of pain. So a similar kind of vikar, like a sattvic vikar what we see on the positive side, the similar kind of vikars they happen on the negative side also to people who experience such kind of great pain. So trembling can be two-sided. The tears which come because of ecstasy or happiness, they are cool tears, and the tears which come because of great pain, they are hot tears. Similarly, the trembling also can be because of both the reasons. And all the asattvic vikars that we see, they both can happen because of both the reasons, out of great spiritual ecstasy also, or out of the fear of material conditions also. So here Arjun's symptoms are because of material fear. It's not because of ecstasy. And what is that material fear? That is the fear of loss of life of his near and dear ones. So all these things are due to the material conception of life. And this is what Krishna will clarify in the next chapter of Bhagavad Gita. He will tell that why you are lamenting for the bodies of these people. That's material conception of life, because we are not these bodies, we are spirit souls, and the soul never dies. There was never a time when all these people never existed, and there will never be a time when all these people will cease to exist. They are eternal personalities. You are eternal, and we are all eternal. So this is a transcendental view of looking at the world. But here on material conception of life, we think that if I kill someone, that then he's gone forever, the relationship is lost. But that is what Arjun will be clarified by Krishna in the next chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So obviously this does not mean that we know that a person is a spirit soul, is not his material body, and even after the body is killed, then still he will continue to live. So this does not mean that we lose compassion in our heart. Not like that someone is dying and he's asking for water, and we do not give him water, telling her you are not this body, why you want to quench the thirst of your body, you are spirit soul, spirit soul can never feel thirst. So that's not the way. So it's like we have to be sensitive, we have to be compassionate, but at the same time we should know the reality. So what is the way of balancing, that Krishna will explain in the next chapter. These things are going to come, that obviously we should not be hard hearted just by knowing that we are not this body and we are spirit soul, but at the same time we should not allow the material conception to uh, become a hindrance in our duty. So that is called maturity. Just like I will give you one example, like when father arranges for the marriage of his daughter, so he arranges with a lot of effort, makes all the preparation. He saves a lot of earnings, which he has done. He has worked hard for his life, collecting so much money, and he is saving bit by bit so that he can somehow or other make a nice grand arrangement for the marriage of his daughter. But after the daughter gets married and the daughter is now about to go to the house of his husband, then the whole family cries. So I personally experienced this in my childhood. So therefore, I just remember this example that I saw that my relatives, one of my relative families, they worked so hard to arrange the marriage of their daughter, and after the daughter was about to leave after the marriage, the family was crying. So I was wondering, why? Then you worked so hard for this marriage. Now also it's not too late. If you want to keep the daughter, then keep her. Now why you are allowing her to go? So the family members, so I was that time immature to understand the logic behind it, but we can appreciate it now that the father cries, the whole family cries when the daughter leaves the house after marriage and goes to the family of her husband. So the family cries, but this does not mean that they stop the daughter only from going. So they have a soft heart and they do feel separation, but they do not allow those feelings to come on the path of their duty. A daughter has to get married, and that is in long run good for her. And she has to go to the house of her husband. And obviously, she will be crying, the family will be crying, but material conception means, yeah, ki we just keep her. No, no, a immature person, don't go. Why so much crying? We want to keep you. Don't allow to go. So similarly, here what Krishna is trying to explain that it's not wrong to feel bad when your family members are getting killed, because a devotee is supposed to be compassionate, but one should not allow such compassionate feelings to come on the way of duty. So this is what Arjun will be instructed by Krishna in the next chapter also, where Krishna will tell also that you will see this verse comes where he is telling that Shitoshna Sukha Dukkada. This material happiness and distress, they are like the changing of winter and summer season. They will come and go. But one should learn to tolerate these things without getting disturbed and should continue with his duty. So this is what we mean by not having a material conception. Does not mean that we have read Bhagavad Gita, so now when our relatives die, then we should not cry. Like even after hearing Bhagavad Gita, when Abhimanyu died, Arjun cried. It's not that he was telling that now I have heard Bhagavad Gita from Krishna, I am self-realized, I understand that he is not this body, his soul. So he was like laughing. No, he cried when Abhimanyu died. But then next day again he was there on the battlefield to perform his duty. He did not allow his grievances to come in the wake of his duties. So that is what is needed. So material conception means that we allow our materialistic feelings to come in the wake of our duty. That should not be allowed. So that is the point that is being explained here. So moving on to the next verse, 1.30, this explains the fear of sinful reactions by Arjun. So here Arjun is telling, I am now unable to stand here any longer. I am forgetting myself and my mind is reeling. I see only the causes of misfortune. O Krishna, killer of the Kesi demon. So here again we can see that excessive attachment for material things puts a man in such a bewildering condition of existence. So because he becomes affected by material conditions. So as we were discussing just now in the previous verse, that one has to perform his duty and one needs to have a compassionate and loving heart, but one should not allow such material affection to overpower us. If we allow it and it to affect us too much, these material conditions to affect too much, then we will surely become bewildered. So we should not be too much attached. Like we have attachment for our family members, for attachment for our job, or attachment to anything, attachment to any of the possessions that we are using, attachment to our smartphones or laptop. or anything. So that's there. But excessive attachment to these things will surely put someone in a bewildering condition, just as Arjun is there in a bewildering condition. So we should be very careful. Attachment means when it is taken away, then obviously there is going to be a lot of pain. Therefore, Shastras always emphasize detachment, because the people who are detached, they hardly experience any pain in the material world. Just like, I will give a very simple example. You see, a man is sitting in his apartment. Suddenly he hears the sound of crashing of some glass, and he knows that outside the children, they are playing cricket, and my car was also parked, and from there he has heard the sound of crashing of glasses. So he becomes very fearful. Oh my god, these children who were playing outside, they must have hit the ball, the cricket ball, on the windshield of my car, and the glass must have broke. So he becomes very fearful, and he runs towards the window to shout at children and chastise them that why have you broken the windshield of my car. So he goes there, and when he sees outside, he sees that his car is perfectly fine. The windshield is not broken, but the neighbor's car's window is broken. The neighbor car's windshield is broken. And then automatically his all anger subsides, and he just peacefully returns back and starts reading his newspaper again. So what has actually happened? Actually, the ball has not hit him. The ball has hit a car, but because he had attachment for the car, therefore he became very angry, very bewildered when he heard that sound of crashing of the glass of the windshield. But he never had attachment to the neighbor's car. So when he saw that his own car has not broken the windshield, he saw that when the neighbor's car, its windshield is broken, then again he becomes very peaceful, because he's not attached to the, he's detached from the car of the neighbor, but he's attached to his own car. So it's a very simple example. Similarly, because we are attached to this body, therefore anything wrong happens to this body or something which is in relation to this body, we become very disturbed. But if we are detached from this body and the byproducts of this body, like house, family, children, relatives, so we must be doing our duty and we must have compassion. But if we have too much attachment, then these things will surely cause pain. And if we are detached from these things, then we will be like a free bird. Then material conditions will not affect us too much, and we will not be disturbed by the material conditions which keep on changing. I hope this point is clear. If not, then surely you should ask me, because this is a very important point to be understood. The importance of detachment if we want to lead a happy life. And that is what is being explained here in Bhagavad Gita. So then Arjun is thinking that those I will kill, they will attain the heavens. But for me, is this kingdom worth the sinful reactions? The same point that we have already discussed previously, that this is the fear of Arjun of accumulating sinful reactions, that those people I will kill, they will attain heavens, because a Kshatriya who dies fighting in a battle, who does not run away, he dies with valor, with dignity like a Kshatriya. For such a Kshatriya, he returns back to not spiritual world, but at least he goes to the heavens, the Swarg Lok. So he's telling that all these people whom I will kill, they will go to the Swarg Lok. But as far as I am concerned, I will get the sinful reactions. So is it worth that after killing all these people, I will get some enjoyment of enjoying the throne of this world? We will become the kings of this world for some time. But is it worth so much sinful reaction? So therefore he's thinking that winning this battle will bring the opposite result. I want happiness, but it will give me misery only. That's what Arjun is thinking. And here we can see that Arjun is thinking about his own self-interest. We can see that he is thinking about I and mine. He's thinking about his own happiness. He's not thinking about his duty, or he's not thinking about what is Krishna's desire. So this is showing the ignorance of his real self-interest. So real self-interest of any person is to surrender his will to Krishna. That is the best thing, that if we are too selfish, then we should become more devoted to Krishna, because real self-interest is there in Krishna's worship, in following Krishna's order. Because the best good that we can do to our own selves is not by following the dictations of our own mind and senses, but by following the instructions of Krishna. So even if somebody is highly selfish, he should full-fledged follow Krishna's instruction for his own benefit. So that is what is being mentioned here, that the real self-interest is in following Krishna's will only. So we should note this point. There is no other self-interest. If you are really a selfish person, then we should practice bhakti even more intensely for our own benefit. So here this verse is there from Srimad Bhagavatam 11.2.37. So this describes very beautifully that when fear arises when a living entity misidentifies himself as a material body because of absorption in external illusory energy of the Lord. So when we misidentify ourselves as material body, we do not understand that we are eternal soul, then all this absorption in external illusory energy causes fear. So when the living entity thus turns away from the Supreme Lord, he also forgets his own constitutional position as a servant of the Lord. So in this material world, we have forgotten that we are servants of the Lord. We are trying to enjoy ourselves. That means we think that we are the masters. But that's not what we are. We are servants of the Lord, and the real way of attaining happiness is to serve the Lord, to again direct all our energy in pleasing the Lord. And when the Lord becomes pleased, then we automatically become pleased. Just like when you supply food to the belly, all the parts of the body automatically get nourished. Or if you water the root of a tree, all the leaves, twigs, and branches, they will automatically get the nourishment. But suppose this takes a rasgulla and tries to enjoy it himself, does not give it to the mouth and through mouth to the belly, then how much can this hand enjoy a rasgulla? But if it takes this rasgulla and feeds it to the mouth, and mouth then offers it to the belly, then all the bodily parts will automatically be nourished. So similarly, Lord is like that belly. If we serve the Lord and satisfy the Lord, then we all will be satisfied. But if we want to take the sense gratification for ourselves and try to enjoy ourselves, it is not going to work. Just like if you water every individual leaf of a tree with a spray, it's a very troublesome process, and it will not do much good to the tree as much as if you directly pour water at the root of the tree. So therefore the living entity, when he forgets the Lord, that he is constitutionally the servant of the Lord, just like the parts of the body, they are the servants of the stomach. They work together to supply the stomach. Similarly, we are constitutionally the servants of the Lord. When we forget and we try to enjoy the rasgulla on our own, then we become bewildered. Then the hand starts becoming weak because it's not deriving its energy from the food, the nourished food. It is just trying to enjoy the rasgulla on its own. So this is called Maya. This is called illusion. Therefore, an intelligent person should engage unflinchingly in the unalloyed devotion service of the Lord. If one is intelligent, he will give all his energy for the service of the Lord under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master whom he should accept as his worshipable deity and life and soul. So that's the process which is summarized here. That we have to serve the Lord under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master whom we should accept as our life and soul. So very important words of Srimad Bhagavatam, and many things we can learn from here. And the nature of this material world is that when one thinks about one's own happiness, automatically miseries follow, and vice versa. Just like we just now discussed this example of the rasgulla. If the hand just thinks about its own happiness of trying to enjoy rasgulla, does not want to share it with the belly, then it will be unhappy always. It will never get nourishment. When but when the bodily parts, they all try to think that how we can satisfy the stomach, so automatically all the parts of the body will be happy. Similarly, if we just keep on thinking about our own happiness, we'll never be happy. But if we water the root of the tree, if we just think about how to please Krishna, it's very practical. You can try it. if we just simply try to please Krishna, automatically we will derive the greatest happiness in this world, the happiness which no material thing can give us. So today we will stop here. We could discuss till verse number 1.30. Tomorrow we'll start from verse number 31 onwards. So anybody has any questions? Okay, so we'll end now. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.